thinking through too a story, the idea of who's the hero, that's really interesting too. Speak a little bit about that. Like, how do you tell a story? Who's the hero? Who's the main character? How do you harness that to tell a good story and to help your people?
Well, we're human beings, right? And we think about ourselves. We think about ourselves more than we think about others. And so if you're a pastor and you're always sharing stories about your life and making yourself the hero, look at me. I served with a pastor, and his philosophy was, look at me as I follow Jesus, and be like me so you can be more like Jesus. And it was well intended, but it just, over time, I felt like there was a disconnect, right? In those stories, the audience wants to be the hero. They want to be able to see themselves inside that story, right? We're all sort of narcissistic in our own way, right? See themselves in that story, and not just look to you, pastor, as the person who's closest to God and always gets it right. So which kind of leads us into some like storytelling fails, or when you're using stories, try to avoid this, right? I would say that this is kind of especially today, we're recording this on Valentine's Day, so this is really appropriate.
Yeah, this is very appropriate.
But don't tell a story or share stories about your wife without asking permission. Like,
yeah, or even your kids, because like if your kids are there, their friends are there, and that can be really embarrassing.
Don't spoil Christmas. Weren't you in the service and the guy spoiled Christmas? So, Santa Claus? So
if you have kids listening to this, just go ahead and pause it or whatever. But I was in a church service, and my pastor, it was a special church service, and it was one of those where it was Christmas time and all the kids were in service. So this is usually not the case, because on Sunday morning, kids are usually in children's church. But they were doing skits and different things like that. So the pastor is preaching Sunday morning, the kids are all there, and no lie, and we have joked about this with him for years. He gets up on stage and he goes, I remember when I found out Santa wasn't real. And all their kids, they were just like, Dad, what? Papa, like
what a way to start a story or a sermon.
And the illustration was good. He just didn't. We'll get into that later. Like, you got to understand your audience, right? But yeah, just understand who your audience is. Ask your wife, ask your children for permission, because something you say could be kind of embarrassing for them, and you don't want to make it weird.
Yeah. Practice the punchline or the climax of the story. I actually made this mistake yesterday. I was doing a generosity moment at our church, and I was telling a story about a librarian who passed away and died and donated his entire estate to a university, $4 million. And I was asking the question, like, how does a librarian get $4 million? And so I started going through this, and my punchline was that he was an assassin. But I tried to make one of the points that he was a crypto investor like a punchline, and it fell flat. I just waited too long. Oh, you laughed. Okay, that's right.
Sadly, I think I was the only one that I heard laughing. Man. But I thought it was really funny.
So, but I sat there. I was like, mid-diagnosis, right? In the middle of my talk, I'm going, why did you try to make that a punchline? That wasn't the punchline. The assassin was the punchline. And I did get to the assassin part, and everyone seemed to laugh at that.
Yeah.
But practice the climax of your story or the punchline, or else it could just fall flat, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Again, don't make the story about yourself so much. There are stories that we tell about ourselves, that we share our faults, the things, you have inspirational stories, no doubt, that God has helped you overcome certain things, or maybe you experienced a miracle. That's okay to share. Just don't make yourself the hero every single story or every single sermon.
Yeah. And also, don't turn yourself. So there's this propensity for all of us to see ourselves as the main character in life. And God is the person who helps us succeed, but we're the main characters. And that's simply not the case. And if we're not careful, we can take the heroes in the Bible. We learn about heroes in the Bible, Hebrews 11. We can take them and basically say, like, that's us, or that can be us. So the main aggressor, right, is always David and Goliath. So it's like, you are David. But it's important that we look at that and understand, who does David represent? Who is the better David? Well, you find out that the true hero is Jesus. He David is this archetype. He's this reflection, and he doesn't get us there. He's an imperfect individual, but it says something about God working in the world. God is the hero in that moment, and Jesus is the better David. So be careful who you choose to be the hero. And even when you tell a story about yourself making a really good decision, I think we can all kind of concede that the Holy Spirit is helping us make that decision. And so make sure you emphasize that. Make sure you say, hey, in my fallen nature, it would have been easy to do this, but the Holy Spirit empowered me. He is the hero in this story to help me to make this right decision. And you might feel like you can't do it. I can't do it either, but the Holy Spirit who lives in me lives in you too. So I think there's a way to do that, to tell stories about even when you make good decisions, but make the hero God. Yep. I think that's really important.